Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and we're exploring the wonderful region of the Cotswolds in southwest England. For the last couple of years, we've been following in the footsteps of Herbert Evans, who wrote this wonderful book, Highways and Byways in Oxford and the Cotswolds, in 1905. But we've almost finished his journey now, so we've decided to revisit the centre of the region and find some hidden gems, places that are not quite so famous, but still just as beautiful. We're here in the incredible and very famous village of Bibury. We've been here before, of course. You'll have come with us, I hope, earlier on in our travels. But today, we're not going to be here for very long, because we're heading for a small village about 1.5 miles away. It's called Ablington. Now, Evans, when he wrote about Bibury, told us about Ablington, a sort of rather wonderful little teaser. He talks about the devious lane which takes us down the valley of the Colne, this beautiful river on my left here. And he says it's a journey to be taken slowly, because it's so beautiful and so narrow that even these days you have to go at a snail's pace. That's what we're going to do now. Come with me. I have read to you before in these films a short extract from J. Arthur Gibbs' classic book, A Cotswold Village, published in the 1880s, which described his first view of the village of Ablington and the manor house he was to call home for the rest of his short life. His book has been a familiar in my life for years, without, for some inexplicable reason, my even bothering to find out where it was of which he wrote. Expectations were therefore running pretty high as we approached the place so hauntingly described in his pages. Evans, our more familiar travelling companion, wrote of this village, "The devious lane which takes us down the valley of the Colne calls for wary steering and a moderate pace. This, however, need not be regretted, for this is not a journey to be taken by express. It is this solitary valley that has found its vates sacer, or sacred poet, in Arthur Gibbs, and my pen shall refrain from lingering over the scenes which he has depicted with such intimate sympathy." Following the windings of the stream, you come to Ablington and its Tudor manor house, which Gibbs loved so well, and where some of the happiest years of his all too brief life were spent. I must say that the extraordinary village doesn't disappoint. It sits in a steep valley fork, the houses, almost without exception, hanging on the slopes with lovely views at the opposite bank. Gibbs wrote of his first impressions, "The cottages, like the manor house and farm buildings, are all built of the native stone, and all are gabled and picturesque. Indeed, save for a few new cottages, most of the dwellings appear to be 200 or 300 years old. In this small hamlet, I noticed that there were no less than 3 huge barns. At first I thought they were churches, so magnificent were their proportions, and so delicate and interesting their architecture. One of these barns is 400 years old." He writes that in this village, in spite of bad times, some of the old customs have not been allowed to pass away, and right merry is the harvest home, and Christmastide is kept in real English fashion, nor do the mummers forget to go their nightly rounds with their strange tale of St. George and the Dragon. Visiting at the beginning of the 21st century, however, I was struck, more than I have been to date in our travels, by the intrusion of modern life. We're standing in front of the amazing Tudor manor house, in which Arthur Gibbs lived when he was writing this wonderful book, A Cotswold Village. a book that has been part of my life for so long. Written just above the door, on the little plaque above the door that you can see behind me, Evans tells us about this, is an inscription which reads, "Plead thou my case, O Lord," by John Cotswold, Anno Domini 1590. John Cotswold was the man who built this house, and he lived in it for most of his life. Gibbs describes village life here in the most wonderfully quiet and sort of rather idyllic way. Things are slightly different now, I fear, but it is a beautiful house. Interestingly, just above the door inside this house, the great solid oak front door, is another legend which reads, "Porta patens esto, nulli claudaris honesto," which means, if my classical education is anything to go by, this door is never locked to honest men. That may have been the case from 1590 until the 1890s when Gibbs arrived, but these days it is quite clearly not. The walls and gates give the firm impression that the hordes are battering at the door and the house is in full defence mode. Gibbs has some interesting 19th century views on that. He writes, "It is a sad thing when the big house is empty. It is to be feared that rich tenants of country houses and the like are apt to take a somewhat limited view of their duty towards their poorer neighbours. To be sure, the good ladies at the great house are invariably ministering angels to the poor in time of sickness, but even in these democratic days there is still too great a gulf fixed between all classes." It's just a little frightening how 130 years on these words ring so true. Perhaps it's a little rich for one who spends his time encouraging the whole world to visit this amazing countryside to complain of the inevitable results of frustrated privacy and rumbling resentment from the locals. In many ways it lives up to its extraordinary reputation. Just don't even think of bringing coaches or caravans down these little lanes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, visit our website for all information about our past and intended activities, and of course you can find us on all the social platforms. And we'll see you next week.